Aaron Ball from Tacos and Touchdowns joining Locked On Longhorns today, talking everything Texas football as we get geared up for another great season.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis and Lacey Butler, your hosts. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Once again, Aaron Ball from Tacos and Touchdowns joining the show today. We're talking everything Texas Longhorns, all of that and more on today's episode. Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Aaron, I'm gonna go ahead and give you the floor. Let's talk Texas football.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you for we actually getting the collab and stuff. I know it's like since last year, since we did something together. We've been in the talks of doing something. I'm glad we get to do it. And the first question I wanted to ask you is, who's in your Mount Rushmore of Texas Longhorn greats, and you can even add coaches in there.
Yeah, this is a doozy. When you sent me this one earlier, I'm like Mount Rushmore of Texas greats, Texas players and coaches. You know, it's a tough question to answer, and especially for me, right? Because you're talking about, you know, this historical blue blood program, and I'm only 30 years old, right? And I was born in 1993, and I haven't been watching Texas football since 1993. So, you know, my viewpoint is limited. So I thought I would answer it two different ways, right? I thought I would give kind of like one that, you know, maybe some people would disagree with, but it's a pretty good, you know, type of consensus list. And then I would give kind of like a personal one. So I think like just based off of my knowledge, you know, who I know enough about, what I've seen, who I think, you know, are kind of the champions of Texas football. If I'm giving a Mount Rushmore, I would say you have to say, you know, Darrell K. Royal, right? The stadium is named after him, you know, won 3 championships in the 70s, I think 11 conference championships. So, I mean, like I said, you know, we're in DKR, you know, watching every Texas home game. So I think you got to put him on the Mount Rushmore. I think you got to put the 2 Heisman winners on there, right? Ricky Williams, I mean, just one of the greatest college running backs ever. So I think you got to put Ricky Williams on there, and then Earl Campbell, you know. So I got Earl Campbell, Ricky Williams, Darrell K. Royal, and I got Vince Young, right? I think every Texas fan, Vince Young is top 4 in their hearts, right? For what we saw in 2005, really 2004 Rose Bowl, and then, you know, 2005 beating USC, stopping that 30-plus game win streak and winning the championship in dramatic fashion. You know, people talk about that as, you know, one of the greatest college football games ever played. So that would be like my, you know, these are who I think, you know, could be a pretty good Mount Rushmore amongst Texas fans is Earl Campbell, Ricky Williams, Darrell K. Royal, and then Vince Young. In terms of since I've been watching, you know, like the 4 best to me or, you know, biggest to me, I would say Vince Young. I would say Ricky Williams. I would say Jordan Shipley, right? I would say Jordan Shipley. And then I want to go Colt McCoy, but I can't have 2 quarterbacks on there. So I'm going to go Mac Brown, right? You know, Mac Brown, because he brought the modern championship. You know, I was in 7th grade when they won that. So that would be my current Mount Rushmore, my modern Mount Rushmore. Vince Young, Jordan Shipley, Mac Brown, and Ricky Williams. But all time, Darrell K. Royal, Ricky Williams, Earl Campbell, and of course, VY, Vince Young. Who about you, though? If you had to name 4, let's go modern, like last 20 years, last 25 years since you've been watching, who would be your Mount Rushmore, right? Like, who would be the 4 that you would have to put up there?
Yeah, of course, you got to have VY. When they went to that championship in 06, I was living in Oklahoma City. So right in the heart of where OU's at. When they won that game, I had my UT shirt on and everything, and it was snowing that day. So I was over there trying to mock out Vince Young, made that big run against in that last part of the game. So Vince Young is definitely number 1. Number 2, it's got to be Ricky Williams, and I have Cole McCoy, and then I got Mac Brown. Like,
okay,
when you think in the last 20 years, those are the guys like right there. All time is basically the same one as you got. Like, when it comes to Texas Mountain Rushmore, those are like the 4 guys you think of like all time. Darrell K. Royal's definitely got to be on there, even though I'm the same age range. I was born in 1990, so I can't remember I didn't get to see all the greats back in the days. So like I know all the older Texas Longhorn fans and be like, "Oh, you forgot this guy. You forgot this." Like I'm only 33. I can't remember all the guys from the 70s. I can go back in the archives, look at some old film or something like that. No disrespect to them. I just didn't get to physically watch those guys.
Yeah, you can only react to what you saw, so that's why I tried to give both of them. But like I said, my viewing experience has really been, kind of like the last 15 years, and so, those are the guys that would be on my Mount Rushmore in terms of since I've been watching.
Yeah. So my next question is not a UT question, but I'm like, I always hear this question all the time. If you had a biopic, what actor would you pick to be you and why?
Yeah, this is a crazy question. I don't know if I've ever been asked this. If I had a biopic, who would I pick to, portray me, right, as an actor? Yeah. I think, I would have like 3 different answers. I'm going to give you 3 different answers, right? Okay. I'm going to say the first one, I'm going to say probably the best choice because literally everybody, including my mama, right? You can't argue with your mama. Literally everybody in the world, and I've cut my beard, so I don't know if I still look like him, but everybody tells me I look just like Jonathan Majors, right? I literally at one point posted a picture of Jonathan Majors on my Instagram story, right? This was like a year ago, before the scandal, right? Before all the stuff. I posted a picture of Jonathan Majors on my Instagram story, and I had people, or at least one person, I don't know why, but I had one person comment on it, and they literally thought it was me. They were like, they thought I was on the cover of a magazine, right? And it was Jonathan Majors. So in terms of the look, right, I guess Jonathan Majors, since so many people told me I look like him, that would be the best. And then obviously the names match up. If I had to just pick who I would want, period, Denzel, obviously, right? Anybody would pick Denzel. We would all want Denzel Washington to portray us. But I don't watch a ton of movies, right? And the last movie I watched is Oppenheimer, right? So obviously, this is a quirky answer. I'm going to give you the I don't see color answer, right? Because I'm black, clearly, right? Elephant in the room. I'm just kidding. I'm black and he's white, right? But I just watched Oppenheimer and I thought it was such an amazing film. And I thought Cillian Murphy as Dr. Oppenheimer killed it, right? I thought he did such a good job. So, in terms of who's hot to me right now, it'd be Cillian Murphy. And so I pick him. So, Jonathan Majors because I look like him, I guess. Denzel because he's Denzel. And then Cillian Murphy because he played the hell out of Oppenheimer. Who do you think? You know what I mean? Like, who do you think should play you in a biopic?
The quick question on the Cillian Murphy: is he going to do a Robert Downey Jr. or is he going to be how he looks normally?
Yeah. Hey man, you know what I mean? They could let the director do that and figure that out. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how he's gonna make that work. You know what I mean? Like I said, I just know. Like I said, the last movie I watched was Oppenheimer, so I'm still on the Oppenheimer fix right now, and I think Cillian Murphy's a dog when it comes to acting. So. However they want to make him look like me, they can figure it out. It's 2024. We got CGI. We got everything,
Yeah, that's fact. So the guy that I came up with, I remember in college, they all used to say I look like Michael Strahan or somebody like that. I don't know if it's the gap tooth or something like that in the smile, but the actor I thought about, I don't really look like him, but we're about the same height and all that stuff. But Winston Dukes, the actor that plays M'Baku off of Black Panther, I think he's a great actor. I wouldn't mind him betraying me.
Okay. So shout out Michael Strahan. I went to Texas Southern University for one of my degrees. So, shout out, fellow alum, Michael Strahan. You do look kind of like him. I would say Samuel L. Jackson too. You know what I mean? He's played literally everybody. He's been in a million movies. But you do kind of got that Samuel L. Jackson look going on. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
I can see that.
On YouTube. So I think Samuel L. You could Samuel L. Jackson. You know what I'm saying? I think that would be a good one as well for sure. For play you in a biopic.
Yeah, they'll do some CGI. I know he's in his 70s and make him look like he's in his 30s or 20s. So,
he's in his 70s?
Yeah, he's in his 70s.
Sheesh, that's crazy. Time flies. When you're having fun, he's had a lot of fun, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So my next question is going into Texas. So, as Texas entered the inaugural season in SEC, what are your expectations for him this year?
I have high expectations. I think it's a combination of where Texas is as a program going into year 4 of Sark. I think we've seen steady improvement. Last year going 11-1 in the regular season, 12-2 overall. I'm not sure if you can get much better than 11-1, especially with Georgia on the schedule and some other heavyweights. But like I said, we've seen a steady improvement from 5-7 to 8-5 to 12-2 and then a playoff appearance. And I think when you look at this roster, when you look at Steve Sarkisian saying that, this is unequivocally the most talented roster he's had, year 3 Quinn Ewers, I expect him to continue to perform at a high level and, be one of the premier programs in college football. When you look at the schedule, I think that is pretty favorable. I think week 2 at Michigan is going to be tough, even though Michigan's going through a lot right now. Connor Stallions isn't on the staff anymore, so I don't know. I don't know how good they'll be, but I think that's going to be a tough game. Obviously you got Georgia, A&M, and Arkansas, 2 very tough games on the road. But I think Texas is better than those teams. It's going to be tough environments. And then anything can happen, with Red River and Oklahoma game in the Cotton Bowl. But we've seen, it's been Oklahoma, then Texas, then Oklahoma. So this should be Texas this year to win. Steve Sarkisian wants to keep going the every year of the year thing. So I just think Texas has a really favorable schedule. I mean, you get to miss, Alabama. You get to miss Tennessee. You get to miss Ole Miss, LSU, right? Like, I think, when you talk about all the best teams in the SEC, like Texas got a few of them and Oklahoma got the most of them, right? So, I think we have a pretty favorable schedule this year, and I just think this is a really good Texas football team. So we've heard for so long that Texas isn't built for the SEC. The SEC is the best conference, this, and that. It's just so much different than the Big 12, and that may have been true in the past, but if we're talking about now, if we're living where our feet are, this Texas football team is really, really good, and they're unquestionably one of the best teams in the conference, and I think week in and week out, you'll see this Texas football team play that way. What do you think?
Yeah, I have high expectations for them. Since Coach Sark's gotten here, they've been getting guys out of the transfer portal, getting recruits, getting the guys that can fit into that are built to play in the SEC. So the expectation there, but I know this ain't going to be a walk in the park type of schedule. We're in the SEC. This is the big dogs. No offense to the Big Ten, but we got some tough games. We got, like you said, Georgia. We got A&M, OU, Arkansas. You got them old school rivals coming back, and they play hard-nosed football. But the team we have is a loaded squad. But I know it's not going to be an easy season, but it's going to be a fun season. I see them having a winning season. There's no I don't think they can handle this. No, Texas can handle being in the SEC.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think a quick word from our sponsors, and then we get back into the interview with Tacos and Touchdowns, talking everything Texas Longhorns. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch, and we're getting closer and closer to postseason baseball. So make sure you get those tickets on the Game Time app. Priority last minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Flash deals. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. All in price, and toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Seat views. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and the lowest price guarantee, your Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
So we're getting back into our next question. So we were just talking about A&M. So after 13 years, Texas versus A&M rivalry game is back at Kyle Field. How excited are you for this game? And what do you think the Longhorn matchup against the Aggies are?
Yeah, I think I'm very excited, right? I think everybody is. I think, it's arguably, not arguably, it is one of the biggest games in college football. I saw something the other day that 4 of the 6 highest, ticket prices in college football this year are Texas Longhorns games. And I think the average ticket price for the Texas A&M game is the highest, right? And so, people are paying upwards of $600, to get into Kyle Field. It's going to be 100,000 strong, whatever the number is. It might break the attendance record at Kyle Field. So you talk about 2011, I graduated high school in 2011, right? So the last time we saw Texas and Texas A&M play, I was coming out of high school, which is crazy, right? And, we've been devoid of that rivalry for a long time. We've seen it, in baseball and other sports, but we know football moves the needle, right? We're out here talking about football, and we're not out here talking about any other sport, right? So just to see Texas and Texas A&M after, this big drop off with all the anticipation, The rivalry is stuck, right? I still get on Twitter. It's still A&M and Texas fans talking trash every day.
Oh,
They've been talking trash for the last 13 years. So the rivalry hasn't gone anywhere. The passion hasn't gone anywhere. We still hate them, and they still hate us. And so it's going to be really fun. And I think it's cool because, we've had all of these like ancillary arguments about who runs the state, right? Because it's like Texas is the flagship program, but you could say since 2011, Texas A&M, at least in terms of a win standpoint, has been more successful, right? Even though Texas has a conference championship in that span, and Texas A&M doesn't. I believe Texas A&M has more wins than Texas in the last 13 years, or it's close. I would have to look at it, but either way, right? You can make an argument in the NFL and things like that throughout a down period for Texas, right? So there has been an argument about who is the premier school in the state of Texas, even though that's a dumb argument. It's always the University of Texas, but now you get to settle that on the football field. Like nothing else matters, right? But who wins that game, right? And everything else is just fluff. So yeah, I'm just super excited for it, just to be able to have actually something to reference, when we're talking trash. Like I said, I get on Twitter every day and it just Aggie this, Longhorn this, Shorthorn this, whatever, right? It is like, who won the game? You know what I mean? Like, who won the game? We're getting to the point where we'll be able to talk about that. As far as how they match up, I think Texas matches up with anybody in the world right now. You know what I mean? We're loaded at every position, 2-3 deep at every position. And I think, Texas A&M, whether Aggie fans want to, admit it or not, they're in somewhat of a rebuild. Now, I do think Mike Elko comes in. He's going to be a really good coach for Texas A&M. I do think that he's kind of the anti-Jimbo Fisher, but that's probably what they need. I do think they still have a lot of talent in terms of blue chip ratio, still probably one of the top 10 rosters in college football. They may not perform like it, but they certainly got a lot of talent on the roster. And I think they're going to be really good defensively. Because, excuse me, my bad. Really good defensively. I was too excited. They're going to be really good defensively, because of Mike Elko on that side of the ball. And I think Connor Weigman, if he can stay healthy, he can perform at a high level. He's completed, almost 70% of his passes when he got hurt last year. So I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. It's going to be a rivalry game. And just like Oklahoma, I don't think anybody can just come in and say we're going to blow the doors off of them, regardless of how talented either team is. I think Texas is going to have, their work cut out for them. And I think Texas A&M is going to have their work cut out for them. But ultimately, you see the hat. I think the Texas Longhorns are going to come out on top. What you think?
Yeah, I think the Longhorns definitely going to come on top. And I'm glad that we finally get to see this because everybody's been talking mess for the last 13 years. Who's the king of Texas? But now this year you're going to see who's going to be the one that gets the crown at the end of the day. It's been, like you said, 13 years. Both of us I was in high school too, and a lot of these guys that are playing on this team were all like in elementary school. Some were just babies, to be honest with you. That's how long it's been since we had this rivalry game. I'm excited about it. The OU game, the Red River rivalry is great, but the in-state rivalry, I hate to say it kind of trumps that one, to be honest with you. And I'm excited to see. I'm just overall excited to see this game. I never thought I'd ever see it again. I look at it as the college football Christmas, and then you got the OU versus Texas Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it.
OU fans that are watching this.
Yeah, they'll be pissed regardless. But yeah, that's a good way to put it. I like that for sure. I like that.
So yeah, my next question is: beside the A&M game, what other game on the Texas schedule have your eye on?
I think I kind of already talked about them, but I would say Michigan. I think that the last 2 years, that week 2, non-conference game for Texas has really kind of showed us what type of team we had. I think, week 2 in 2022, that Alabama game in DKR, as you see behind me, really kind of showed us that, okay, Texas was progressing, right? Because we had the 5-7 season, then you beat a ULM, which of course you're supposed to beat ULM. Then you're 21-point underdogs to Alabama. Right. And, Alabama's riding high. They had just come off, I believe, the national championship loss, right? To Georgia. Right. If I'm not mistaken. Either way, it was a really good Alabama team and it wasn't a good Texas team at that point. So when you look at it, Texas comes in there in that game and they have a lead with, I think, 84 seconds left, only lose by 1 when they were 21-point underdogs. That showed us that Texas was not the same team that they were the previous season, 5-7. We ended up going 8-5 that year. Then last year, right, we go into, Bryant-Denny and we beat Alabama on the road, right? And you're like, okay, yeah, like Steve Sarkisian's got his group. like Texas is here now, right? And then they end up 12-2 and in the playoffs. So I think when we're trying to figure out what this Texas team is going to be, I think that first real test against Michigan is really going to show us what type of, team we're going to be this year. I expect us to be really good. I expect us to be in the playoffs, especially with the expansion of, 12 teams. But, our first real test, right? Our first real measure of our guts, our character, our football acumen is going to be in Ann Arbor, on what is it, September 7th? You know what I mean? September 6th, whatever the date is. So super excited about that game. That's the game that sticks out the most to me. One, because of Michigan's play style, that's going to be a muck it up, ground and pound, play defense, time of possession. They're really going to try to, what's the word I'm looking for? Play an old school type, level of football, right? Where Texas is going to come in there, trying to play 7-on-7, right? So I think that game really is going to show us, what this Texas team is made of this year, even though I think, they'll be really good and be in the playoffs, regardless of what happens in week 2 against Michigan.
Yeah, when it comes to that game, that's the true test. You're playing against a blue collar physical team, and that's gonna be a true test to how this team is gonna set the tone when it comes to this game. Like you're gonna play against hard nosed teams, like the Georgia and the SEC and the rest of the teams. But there's Michigan. Yeah, I know it's not a Harbaugh is not there. I know Moore is there. So I know this was a little bit of a loaded question. So with Adonai Mitchell, Javion Sanders, and Xavier Worthy declaring for the NFL draft, what is the expectation for Jonte Cook and Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bolden and Amari Neblack, what should be their expectation for stepping into their similar roles as them?
Yeah, I think, the same thing, right? Build on what those guys were able to do. Like you said, Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, Jatavian Sanders, and Jordan Whittington, right? Now Texas is in the position where, we're not rebuilding, we're reloading, right? And so you expect to bring in guys like Isaiah Bond, Silas Bolden, all of the transfers, and then now the, high school recruits that are stepping up into that role that are going to be catching passes. And especially for Quinn Ewers year 3, right? When he's trying to win the Heisman, you're trying to have a top offense in the country, and you're trying to win a conference and national championship. You don't have really time for, those guys to get acclimated, or you don't really have time for those guys to develop on the field, right? They have to step on the field and be just as productive or more productive than Xavier Worthy and that group was last year, right? If you're trying to, be conference champions in the SEC and then be national champions. So, I think the expectation for them is just to step in and perform right away, right? I think the good thing about this group is the roles were so defined last year, right? Because you had the 3 receivers that you relied on. And you really didn't go into any other ones outside of that. I think Jonte Cook had 8 catches, and he was your 4th receiver, right? Everybody else was over 30. So, you only used 3 wide receivers, and then Jatavian Sanders was your number 1 tight end by a big margin. I think this year you have 6 wide receivers that we're going to see, utilized at some rate. There was a practice report that came out last week that said we potentially have 3 tight end ones, Amari Neblack, Gunnar Helm, and Juan Davis. So I think that in terms of the passing group, you have so many, mouths to feed that I do think it takes pressure off of those guys individually, because there's just so many guys that can go out there and make plays for this Texas football team. But, I think the expectation is to step on the field and dominate just like the group did before them.
Absolutely. So that it almost brings back to what you're saying. It's basically a 7-on-7 when it comes to our offense. So you're like, you go to the next guy, like, okay, this guy could take the top off of defense, and you got guys that are refining route running as well. They're not just fast guys. They could do some. They're refining their routes. They may not be big guys like a AD Mitchell. You do got a Ron Ringo who's about 6'2", about 210. But most of the guys are speed guys. I call them like they're track stars, but they got route running skills. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's what I've seen with the guys we got.
Yeah, no, I think that, we do have a track team, but like you said, I think they're multifaceted receivers, right? They're guys that can go out there and break you down with the route running as well. Just like Xavier Worthy, right? The narrative was always, oh, he's just a speed receiver, right? Not saying that, people were saying he's just a speed receiver, but that's what people talked about. That's how the conversation started, right? But he also could break you down as well as anybody with the route. So, Steve Sarkisian is not going to bring in guys that just run fast, right? He's going to bring in guys that can make plays all over the field. And, like I said, I think we got at least 6 guys in the room that can do that right now, hopefully at a high level.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next one is, so when it comes to I didn't lost my train of thought. No, okay, here it is. So what UT has the number 5 recruiting class and the number 6 transfer class. Which transferees and freshmen are you excited to watch wearing the burnt orange and white?
Yeah. So in terms of transfers and high school recruits, I'm most excited to watch this year. I would think transfer. I'm gonna give you two answers, right? I think on defense is Trey Moore, right? That'd probably be the consensus. We've lacked at the University of Texas an elite edge rusher. Since Steve Sarkisian took over, and when you look at Trey Moore's numbers the last 2 years, albeit at UTSA, right? They've been dominant. They've been elite, right? And everything we've heard since he's been on campus is Trey Moore looks the part. So I'm really excited to see him on this defense. You look at last year's playoff games, right? Where, Michael Penix Jr. has the game of his life against Texas, and then immediately in the next game looks like a shell of himself, right? And a lot of that had to do with Michigan's pass rush compared to ours, right? So, I think what can take this defense to the next level, what can take this football team to the next level is elite edge play, and we potentially have that with Trey Moore. Offensively, Silas Bolden. I'm so excited to see him 5'8", 165, whatever he is. Just a dog, right? You got wide receivers that could play in the slot, but you want to see them outside. You got wide receivers that can play on the outside, but you prefer to see them in the slot. You got wide receivers that you could hand the ball off to, but you'd probably, prefer to see them at wide receiver. I think wherever you put Silas Bolden on the field, he's a threat to hit his head on the goalpost. He just got on campus, in May. This is, really over the last week, our first time really seeing him with the team and seeing him in football action. And Steve Sarkisian can't stop talking about Silas Bolden. Man, I just think in terms of an all-around football player, wherever you put him, special teams, running back, slot, outside wide receiver, even at 5'8", he's just a dog. I'm super excited to see him this year. And, like I said, I just think he's that wild card on this offense that can literally do everything. It can score every time you give him the ball. And then a high school recruit that I'm excited to see, I would have to say Colin Simmons, right? Just watching him in those state championship games, watching all those Duncanville games and seeing him dominate. Like I said, it's just been a while since we've had elite edge rushers. And typically, those 5-star level edge rushers that, we get picked out of, high school end up being first-round picks in the NFL, right? There's a pretty good track record of 5-star edges coming out of high school ending up being first-round picks in the NFL. So Colin Simmons certainly has that pedigree, and I think he could go down as one of the best edge rushers to ever play at the University of Texas. He certainly has that talent level. What's a transfer and a high school recruit you're looking forward to seeing this year?
So the transfer, you kind of spoke on him. I was so excited about Trey Moore. When he said he was going to make his announcement, I was thinking of him in that burnt orange and white. So I was like, I watched him because he's from the area I'm from. So I was excited to see him. I heard he was a transfer. Like, oh, he'd fit perfect with UT. We need that pass rusher. He brings that tenacity. He broke records at UTSA. He had 18 tackles for loss, 14 sacks. He's a dog. So that's what I see in Trey Moore. But the freshman I got is Ryan Wingo out of he's from Missouri. He comes from a running back family. His brother played running back at Arkansas. He has that RB size. He's 6'2", 208 with track speed. He has that track background. He catches the ball, looks like a running back when he's breaking tackles, showing no fear to contact, having that great ball tracking ability and that jump ball. I'm just hopefully that can transfer to the next level. Coach Sark talks about him and stuff. I believe he's going to be in that 6-man rotation of receivers he's been talking about. And I know he's not going to be the number one receiver. I know you're going to hear his name a couple of times this season. And I think he's going to make big impact as a freshman.
Yeah, I agree. I think Ryan Wingo, we've heard so much about Ryan Wingo, you know what I mean? Like, I think that, for sure, like, people are just waiting to see him, and I think starting next year, he'll be, one of your number one wide receivers. But you can't go wrong. Like you said, when you have the number 5 recruiting class, when you're bringing in, 4 or 5 stars, when you're bringing in not 4 or 5 stars, but you're bringing in 3 or 4 or 5 stars in every cycle, then you can't go wrong with these guys, man. I'm excited to see Brandon Baker, at right tackle whenever he gets his spot. You know what I mean? So, yeah, when you bring in good players, I'm excited to see all of them. I believe burnt orange for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is my last question, but then I got a fun question at the end of it. So,
okay.
Yeah, last year's freshman class, we had a lot of contributors, C.J. Baxter, cornerback Malik Muhammad, Anthony Hill. But which one of these guys do you think is going to make the big splash in their sophomore season?
Yeah, I think I think a lot of these guys, right? I think in terms of who would be the best player of that group, I think it's going to be Anthony Hill. I said that I think he'll be a SEC Defensive Player of the Year before he leaves Texas. I think he's just all world in that regard. But in terms of the player that I'm going to be watching the most closely, it's going to be Cedric Baxter, right? When you bring in the number one running back in his class, a 5-star out of Florida, this is running back you, right? We talked about on this episode Earl Campbell, Ricky Williams, right? Deontay Foreman winning the Doak Walker, Cedric Benson, rest his soul. Jamal Charles, right? Bijan Robinson, just as recently as Bijan. So, we've had elite running backs at the 40 acres. And when we brought in Cedric Baxter, people said that he would be the next running back in that class, right? Like he would be the next running back to cement himself amongst the all-time greats at the University of Texas. And to my eye, he was a freshman last year, obviously. He came over from Florida. He dealt with some injuries, and so it was a new, environment. But I thought Jaden Blue was the best running back on the team last year, right? Well, Jonathan Brooks, obviously, but then, at the end, it was Jaden Blue, right? And I think even in the spring game, Jaden Blue looked like the best running back on the team. But Cedric Baxter, we know he's going to touch the ball 250 plus times next year. And for Texas to be, one of the best teams in college football, Cedric Baxter is going to have to be one of the best running backs in college football. So if we're talking about, who needs to make the biggest splash in their sophomore year, I think it needs to be Cedric Baxter, because the passing game, I'm not worried about that, but he's going to determine how good our run game is. And overall, if our run game isn't great, or Cedric Baxter is not number one running back in the country like we thought he was, or, he's still not, on that level of running back that I just talked about, then I do think that'll hurt our offense. And I think it limits our ceiling. So the sophomore I'm, most interested in watching is Cedric Baxter, because I think that, he's going to be the key to unlocking an unstoppable offense for Texas. Just like when we talk about that 2020 offense with Alabama and all those wide receivers and Mac Jones and Devontae Smith winning the Heisman, Najee Harris was pretty good that year too. Right? So, I think Cedric Baxter is going to have to fill in that role. What about you? Who's the one freshman from last year that you think needs to make the biggest splash this year?
I'd say it has to be Cedric Baxter. I'm not just saying that because you're saying that. I actually got it written down about. So when it goes, because I think that's a good dynamic duo, him and Blue on this team. But I think Baxter needs to make that step. He has a great size. He's about 220, and he offers stuff in the receiving game as well. If he can step up in the running game as well, he's a physical running back. That's the guy, and he ran over 4 yards per carry last year. He had 656 yards. Man, I'm surprised I remembered all that right now, but that's the guy I hope to make that big splash this season, because, like you said, we're running back you. We usually have 2 running backs going into the draft. Like the year before that, we had Roe Johnson. Man, I almost forgot who was the other running back we had.
Well, we had
Bijan,
and Roshan have all been drafted in the last 3 years. So last 2 years.
Yeah, I can't believe I forgot.
So I ain't Jonathan Brooks, so it's 4, in the last 2 years.
Yeah. So we've always been loaded with running backs, and I believe those 2 are the next guys up when it comes to that. Like they have the talent and the physicality and the speed. Like I'm excited when it comes to the running back. I know we're going to be good at that level. It just I want to see what you can do in your sophomore year. Your freshman year is cool, but can you step it up to the next level?
Right.
So I appreciate you, bro. For my last question is a fun question. So we've been talking about on Tacos a Touchdown. We've been talking about it's a road trip, Texas college football road trip. So on a road trip, you got to listen to some music. So what are 3 artists that are on your playlist when you head into Austin?
Oh, 3 artists that are on my playlist when I'm heading to Austin.
Yeah, okay.
Right now, I'll give you right now.
Okay.
Who I'm listening to the most. Okay. I don't even know if these are going to be familiar names, but, it's a fun question. Like you said, Mozzie. I've been listening to a lot of Mozzie over the last year out of Sacramento. Definitely one of my favorite rappers. Just really, I've been listening to a lot of Mozzie for sure. So I'll say Mozzie number 1. Probably not a household name, but I'll say Shorty from Baltimore. I've been listening to a lot of him lately. Really like his sound, really like his style. So if you haven't checked out Mozzie or Shorty, make sure you go check out those 2. I know there's probably some older people listening, like, who are these guys, right? You know what I mean? When they're listening to Tupac, and it's like, now they got all these crazy names. So I would say Mozzie, Shorty. And then I would say, if I had to pick another one, I would say Gunna. That last Gunna album just rides so crazy. So I would say Gunna. But then obviously, you got Drake, Kanye, Rick Ross, the GOATs, Future, of this era. But right now, you know what I mean? Those are the three I'm listening to the most: Gunna, Shorty, and Mozzie. So, what about you? If you had to pick one artist, right? Because we're getting up on time, but if you had to pick one artist to listen to the whole way, to get to Austin, who would you be picking?
Oh, it'd be between Big X the Plug and then this guy I used to listen to in high school was Big Crit back in the day.
Yeah, you ain't gotta say that. Everybody know who Big Crit is, but shout out Texas Big X the Plug. You know what I'm saying? That's a good plug, literally. You know what I mean? Shout out Big X the Plug for sure. For sure, those are good answers, man. Aaron Ball, this is our second time collabing. It's the second time doing tacos and touchdowns and Locked On Longhorns. Really appreciate it. Aaron, let them know where they can find you. You know what I mean? They can, get into some of your future stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Y'all can follow me at Aaron B901, my personal one, and then our podcast at Tacos Touchdowns, all lowercase on IG, capital T's on Twitter. I still call it Twitter. I know it's X, but it's still Twitter to me. But then on Facebook, follow Tacos and Touchdown Live, and definitely be having some stuff coming up on Thursday. We're gonna be talking about some Hard Knocks, and then Thursday we're going to be talking about some NFL. We touch into a little bit of everything when it comes to football. So it's not just going to be Cowboys. I know y'all see it in the background. We're going to be talking about some UT football as well. I'm excited for this season, and I appreciate you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the show, bro.
Yeah, no problem, man. Cowboys the only NFL team that matters, right? So that's the only NFL team you need to be talking about for sure. But no, I appreciate you coming on, and had a lot of fun doing this episode, man. Hook 'em.
Yes, Hook 'em.
Peace.